All right, happy Friday. I am Rudy Knapp. This is Legacy Build Your Kingdom. We are back. And with this podcast today, we want to dive into some new topics that kind of relate back to some of the topics we've been talking about. I do a little reflection every time I do a podcast. And one of the things that I reflect on is what's actually happening in the world today. What do I see in relationships? What do I see in conversations that I've had with other people? How these topics come up over and over again. And when they resonate in my brain, I come up with this concept of, hey, let's talk about this. Let's put out some viewpoints on this. Let's see if people can see a different perspective than their own. One of the hardest things I've ever come across, and I've realized throughout my 40 some years of life, is that everybody will stick to their perspective if it benefits them. And so one thing that we have to start looking at is, how do we keep an open mind to see other people's perspective? And how do we take from their perspective to add to our own perspective? We've talked about this a little bit in this podcast early on, a year ago or so, but perspective is one of the most important things when we talk about having arguments or getting through arguments. We sometimes are going to believe in our perspective, and nothing you can say is going to change it. And we have facts and we have things that will come up in our own brain that says, you know what, this is what I believe and it's not going to change. And sometimes what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to look at other people's perspectives and take a different viewpoint and a different way of looking at life in order for us to actually evolve and get past whatever the issues are or whatever the discussion is. And so one of the things that I noticed is that when we start talking about perspectives, if you are somebody that has a strong opinion on something, it takes a little bit more for you to change your ways of thinking and listening to whoever the conversation's with. We talk about relationships, we talk about being at work and your boss, and we talk about any of the conversations that you have on a daily basis that can be affected by you not taking a deep breath, listening first and not talking, and then adding to the conversation. I say this because a lot of these topics seem to relate and they overlap, and it all comes back to perspective. And then we've talked a lot about narrative. What are we creating in our brain that we believe is something that's happening without facts, without truth? That happens over and over again. There's a lot of things that we will create in our brains instead of taking a step back and eliminating that concept of we're making this up. We start using facts, we start using our perspective to come up with this narrative. And when we start adding other things into it, it changes everything. So going back to this conversation, last week we talked about forgiveness. We talked a little bit about apologies and genuine apologies, and how when we take this approach and we take the wrong approach, to apologizing or to asking for forgiveness or giving forgiveness, I should say, we are now constituting this idea that we're taking on pain for ourselves. So if we don't forgive, we're causing pain to ourselves. If we do forgive, then we can release that anger. We can release all the narrative in our brain that's upset with someone else. You're still going to be upset, and you're not going to forgive people for certain things, but you can allow them to have this idea of you releasing the anger for them. Now, I say that maybe I said that misspoken, because you should forgive at some point, but how you forgive them, and if they actually want to be forgiven, that comes down to their actions. So we talked a little bit about actually genuinely being sorry for what you've done, and then we also talked about repent. And how repent would mean you're going to make up for that. You're going to have that conversation with that person, and you're going to say, what can I do to make this better? What can I do to get your forgiveness? I feel awful. How can I help you to forgive? Because the forgiveness is for yourself. It's not for them. And when you can do that, when you can generally get past that anger and that upsetness, you'll release them and you'll let go. And then they don't have to be part of your life. And if you want to reconcile, then what will happen is then their approach and their effort is going to dictate all of those things. So just a little recap of what we talked about before. I think this all goes right back to what I was saying about your way of thinking. So how do you control your way of thinking for your future, for your life? And see, the hardest part that I see is we live in this world where everything seems to be already set for us. And I no longer want to think that way. I no longer want to live my life where I believe it's already set in a path that's supposed to happen. I'm going to live my life in what's best for what I think my life is. And that starts with goal setting, and that starts with looking at what do you want in your life? What makes you happy? What are you looking for? When we start talking about relationships and we start talking about jobs and careers, what's going to make you feel a purpose, number one, and feel happy to be where you're at in life? I think we're all searching for purpose. We're all searching for this happy feeling and where we're at. And some people have it and some people don't. I mean, how many of us in life have gone through the mundane routine of what life is supposed to be? And I've talked about this recently and how people thought, okay, well, I go and finish high school, I go to college, I meet somebody, date them for a couple years, I get engaged, I get married, I have kids. This is a process that people are saying, and they like to call it the right way of doing things. Well, there really isn't a right way of doing anything, but this is set by society norms, and I don't want to live by society norms. If that works for you, great. If you were high school sweethearts and it worked out for you, excellent. But what are your goals in life, and what do you want for you and your kingdom? How do you look at life, and how do you set this big picture versus small picture of your life? And I think that's what my topic is here. I talk about this a lot, and I think a lot of people maybe miss this point, but I believe this is one of the most important points of how you can control your life and how you can see progress and growth in your life. And what I like to call it is macro versus micro. Now, we all know macroeconomics and microeconomics. We always talk about these certain things, but let's dive into those words, macro and micro. And I think when we do, we start understanding that there has to be both involved in your life. And what I notice is when I talk to people and I see people around, and I've experienced myself in all kinds of daily activities, most of us will focus on a micro. And when we focus only on micro, what we're saying is we're going to focus on daily activities, one step at a time, every single day, routine. And what ends up happening is we end up feeling in certain ways where our purpose is not there. We lose sight. We are upset. We're not happy. We talk about marriages all the time, and everybody talks about, oh, it's marriage, it's the marriage life, and I got fat because I was married, or this is what I do on a daily basis. This is what dad life looks like. This is what mom life looks like. This is what we have to do every day. And you're right. You have a micro way of looking at things because you have to. You have kids, you have activities, you have certain things. Is that the only thing? And if you're only looking at that micro, well, every day I go to work, I come home, I make dinner, I take the kids to sports, whatever the case is, you're going to burn yourself out. And so I'm here to say, let's talk about the micro and the macro. And so when you're talking about macro thinking is a big picture approach, focusing on systems, maybe trends, long-term strategies, while micro thinking is that detail-oriented approach that focuses on here and now, tasks and individual components right now. Macro thinking is like creating the overall vision, the mission of your life. While micro thinking is like day-to-day work or the specific like actions needed to achieve it. Like I said, day to day, what do you need to get your family moving and working? Both are crucial as macro strategies are implemented throughout a series of micro leveled actions. So you need both. And I give this example because I purposely see this in my own life. And I look at this and I say, if I don't see a big picture, if I don't look at my goals, if I don't see the bigger end of why I'm doing the day to day, go to work, grind, get your money, do this for your kids, if I don't see the big picture of what this is going to do for my family, for me personally, for my happiness, why am I doing it? And I think we get in this rut as people and we go day to day, and you have to. But what does it lead to? That's why I'm a big component of looking at setting goals and finding ways to plan things and have a trip planned or have some activity planned or have something to look forward to. Now, how does this work, right? I think that we continue to talk about this concept of macro versus micro. I mean, macro thinking is important about approaching micro activities because it provides a big picture perspective and it guides daily actions towards larger goals. And it ensures that those micro tasks are purposeful and aligned with long term success. If they're not purposeful, if you do those tiny minute little things every single day and they lead to nothing, you're doing it for what reason? You're going to burn yourself out. You're not going to see the value. When we look at the mission and the vision, we look at this macro, this big picture. What we sell ourselves is, hey, we're doing this for some reason. There's a purpose here. And we can't lose sight of that. Without a macro framework, it's easy to become busy in small tasks that don't lead to meaningful outcomes or to lose sight of the ultimate objective. Macro thinking sets the vision, while micro activities are the intentional steps that fulfill it. These are things that we have to start looking go hand in hand, macro versus micro. So what are the benefits of macro thinking for these micro activities? Well, you're going to set clear directions, right? You got to set clear directions. Macro thinking establishes this overall vision, mission, strategy, goals, and provides this framework. And we got to make sure that the micro activities we do are the right ones to focus on in order to get to that macro, to get to that big picture, to get to that purpose. It's going to be intentional. You're going to ensure that it's intentional. Keep these long-term objectives in mind. Individuals and organizations can ensure that daily activities are a deliberate part of the journey to success rather than just a random to-do list. They have to mean something if you're micro. It's going to be a priority, right? You have to make this a priority. A macro perspective helps you prioritize your time and energy on tasks that have a high return on investment, preventing you from getting stuck on urgent or unimportant activities. Think about that. You prioritize it. This is your life. It's important for us to understand that if we're just going day to day, we're wasting our time. Just remember, you have one life. You have one chance at this. And if we're wasting all of our time with these day-to-day activities with no purpose or no meaning behind them or no big picture to look at, there's a problem. We're going to connect actions to purpose. That's another set here. Think about that concept of driving long-term success. The micro focus is about efficiency in the present. The macro focus is about effectiveness in the long run. It ensures your efficiency is directed towards what truly matters, leading to lasting and sustainable results. You're not getting results if you're not purposely using those micro activities every day to get to a big purpose or get to the goal. I'm going to give you an example. We talk about this a lot. I ran the marathon last year, 1 year ago from this past marathon. And one of the things that I noticed is I had to prepare. There is a process. And so when you do that and you go out there and you start your training and you run a mile the first day and then you run another 3 miles the second day and you're running another 3 miles and you're running another 3 miles and you're constantly adding to your consistency. I am micro training. But here's the problem. I have to have a mindset in my brain that there is a macro result. What is all of this training going to give me? What is the purpose? Well, it's going to give me this concept of crossing that finish line and accomplishing something that was difficult and hard. So when I ran the marathon, every step of the 26.2 miles, it's hell. But it's not as much hell when you start talking about you have this picture in your brain, this macro picture that says there's a finish line and there are people cheering and you're going to cross. And guess what? It's going to be worth all that training. It's going to be rewarding intrinsically. There is a macro approach. All that training led me to being able to finish. Every step that I took in the pain and the things that I went through, it all led me to that macro. So when we start looking at this as a marathon, and our day-to-day lives will get boring at times, and we are sitting in marriages that will get boring at times, but how do we set goals and how do we move forward so that when we're thinking about our lives, that we use that micro to get to that macro? And I think when we start looking at that, it makes a little bit more sense to us. So how do we use macro thinking with micro activities? Plan your path. Before diving into tasks, use macro thinking for planning stage. Look at the big picture first. Set your goals, you're identifying skills, you're creating a long-term plan. And then be strategic with micro tasks. Use micro thinking to identify what the right things are to do, to work on. Then use micro strategies to complete them with efficiency. Then you're going to regularly return back to this big picture. Go back to the big picture, the macro. Think about it and go, hey, am I doing well? What's my progress look like? Review it. Look at your larger goals and then make changes if you need to. Sometimes you're going to need to make changes and adjust. And then build purposeful micro habits. Make sure that these daily habits exist. Every day you're doing certain things that lead towards some bigger benefit. Now, how can we relate this? We can relate this in our jobs. We can go back and say, I have this job, I'm a teacher, and every day I do the same routine. If the kids are not showing results, how do I understand and why am I doing this for them? So when I have purposeful micro habits that happen in the classroom, whether it's towards behavior, whether it's towards learning, whether it's towards understanding, I have to have a bigger picture. I need them to understand these skills. That's the bigger picture. I need by the end of the unit that they're supposed to know these things. That's the bigger picture. That's the macro. What are the tiny things that we're going to do, the micros, to get to that point? Let's look at it as a relationship. What are you doing on a daily basis with your person? Are you showing them respect? Are you showing up for them? Are you doing the things that they need for you? Are you somebody that constantly looks at a relationship and says the little things matter? The micros, they matter. But what's the big picture? Because you can do all the little things, but if you're not doing the big things, or you're not getting to the big things, I should say, the macro, the big picture of what you're looking for in your life to be happy, it's not working. So the little things will lead to that macro. When we don't do the micro daily activities, then the macro doesn't exist, and you're not with that person, or you're not getting married, or whatever your goals are. And the two people in a relationship need to have the same concept of thinking towards their future. Set goals. And what are our goals for a relationship? What are our goals for being successful? What are our goals for communicating? And we have these big picture goals, and we're doing these tiny little micro things every day, but are they leading towards the communication, towards the happy relationship, towards the goals in your relationship that you want to get to? We have to start looking at this in a manner in which both are needed. But if you never look at that macro, you never look at the big picture, you are going to struggle, and things are going to get horrible for you because you're going to hate the daily activities that are redundant. So look at that big picture, but also make sure that you're diligent about those small micro things. Now, I know this whole conversation is kind of repeated a lot, talking about this. I do think that this is a very important way to think about your future and what you want in life. I've watched many people that are struggling because, they don't like their life because it didn't turn out the way. I'm going to leave you with this because I think this is a really important quote that I heard and I've passed it on, and I think it's really important. If you owned a business and your business failed, who's to blame for your business failing? And one thing that you'll say is, well, the CEO, the one in charge. Yep, you own that business. You're the CEO. You're the blame. What if that business does well, makes a lot of money, is very prosperous? Guess what? You are to blame as well. You are the CEO. You are the one that created it. You are the one that gets all the blame or the credit, right? Now let's think about that in terms of your life. You are in charge of your life. You are the CEO of your life. And if your life doesn't turn out the way that you wanted it, picking the right people, doing the right choices, surrounding yourself in the right manner, looking at the big picture macro, making sure that you understand that this is what I want in life, and you go and fight for what you want in life. If your life doesn't turn out the way you wanted it, you're the blame. I don't care what bad situations happen to you in life. I don't care how you've been presented. It's still your life to make those decisions based on anything that's happened to you. We all have shitty life at some point. We all have something bad happen. You still have the ability to change your life on every decision to make it a happy life. You are to blame if it doesn't work out. You are also to blame if it does work out and it's happy because you made smart choices, because you changed, because you set goals, because you looked at the macro, because you did the micro to get to be happy to the macro. You have to see that this is your life. And so many times we're victims in our life. This happened and this is my past and we're blaming the past and this happened to me. I've done it. I try not to be a victim in anything in life, but I know I've poor me at times. I won't live that way anymore. It's a learning lesson. Everything's a learning lesson. You put up with some things, it's a learning lesson. You surround yourself with people that don't care about you, that's a learning lesson. You decide to make poor decisions and make the wrong decisions, that's a learning lesson. But every time you make a decision, you still have an opportunity to fix things and change things. And even if it's just for your own intrinsic values, even if it's for your own heart, even if it's for your own help for your life and fixing the things that you're going through, you have an opportunity. So when we look at our lives, take ownership of your life. Take ownership of the mistakes you've made. Take accountability for what you've done and fix it so you're happy with your life. So that you can look back at your life when all is said and done and say, hey, I am the CEO and I'm happy with the way it turned out, instead of living in regret, because many people do. And it's because of their own choices, and it's because they didn't look at the big picture. They looked at the small, minor things that didn't add up, and they didn't intentionally look at those small things to make it to where you get to that big picture of what your goals are. All right, I am signing off. I know this one's a little bit deep. I will return this next week. I think that my next topic is probably going to be on this concept of delayed gratification. I think that's a really important one in life. We have a struggle in our society nowadays, and there's too many people that want immediate gratification, and they want everyone to forgive and give and hand them things. And, this is not the way life works. So we will get into that concept. I hope that everyone has a great Friday. I hope that their holiday is coming up and that you guys are thankful for everything that you have in life. Start changing your life. Start becoming happy. Start looking at your kingdom and surround yourself with the right people. Look in your life and say, this is my kingdom and I love these people and I'm going to do what I can for these people by making yourself a better person. All right, signing off. Have a good one.